So in this last set of videos, I'm going to be thinking about curriculum versus resources. And so, curriculum is really kind of what to teach, and the resources are what we use in how to teach it. And so we want to be mindful of, how those two are connected, but also how they are different. You'll see here, in terms of managing resources and curriculum development. So curriculum development costs money. Okay, well, let's be upfront about this. You're paying teachers to write curriculum, so you're paying for either their time or in some way release time if you're doing it during the school day, because then someone has to teach the class. So in some way, the actual writing process costs money. And then the material process also costs money because then you actually have to purchase the equipment that goes along with that. And so here you'll see just kind of a sample, curriculum calendar, or the revision cycle for kind of big areas. And you'll notice that they are paired with like a major core area with like a secondary area. Because music's going to come with potentially a lot of instruments, but foreign language may be just using online books, or science comes with a lot of equipment, so they kind of have their own with tech ed, especially now when you're looking at things like 3D printers, right? You have health and PE along with ELA because of just the amount of what's needed for an ELA teacher in every building at every grade versus one health and PE teacher in an elementary school, or maybe two or three in a middle school. So there's just kind of a logistical process for that. So there's a year where you design the curriculum, develop, you test it. This is where you rely on the standards and do your needs assessment, all that stuff we've been talking about. We then get into resource implementation. So what does it look like now that we're doing it? And then, when are we assessing and evaluating? So if we need to update our assessments to get better understanding about the program for ELA, that'll be this upcoming year. You'll also want to be thinking about is how are the resources accessible and managed? So probably like many school districts, we had a shared drive where everybody would access. We are currently moving to Google Docs for managing all of our curriculum docs. But at the same time, what happens is when there's a shared folder, inevitably somebody copies it, and then there ends up being like multiple versions of the curriculum. So you'll see here that we have this, it's called LibGuides that we have, and there's a tab for each subject. We even have new teacher resources on here, SLOs, teachers to pull from. You can see that when the teacher clicks on it, it gives them access to, and this one here is, looks like we're in the, trying to find what tab this one is. It has agriculture, family, and I think it's other secondary courses. It's got family and consumer science, business, and the like. But this way, the current version is always there and it's accessible from anywhere. So we also want to make sure that our resources are matched to the actual program or the curriculum delivery. So if you're going to teach in a balanced literacy model, picking the units of study, which you've heard me talk about, a couple times this semester, is going to be more appropriate than pulling in a basal series. So you're going to have to look at what is the approach to teaching so that when you're getting those resources, that they are appropriately matched. And there's this great website, whatworksclearinghouse.com, that you can pretty much look up every program if you are looking to evaluate the effectiveness of that. You'll see here, I actually have my budget set up in Google Docs. And so you'll see here, this is a year that you can see how much we spend in materials, subscriptions, conferences. So overall ELA alone was a $100,000 budget. which actually is not that bad considering all the books that come along with ELA. I actually now budget on a yearly basis so that it's not so overwhelming all at once and it doesn't interfere with the other content areas. And actually, my administrative assistant actually shares this Google Doc with me. And so as we spend money, she puts the money in that we're spending, and I have it color coded. So when it's green, it means we can continue to spend the money. When it's yellow, that means we have to start looking at, not spending too much more. And red means we need to stop spending. So that's something that you're going to want to be thinking about and being fiscally sound with that because, if you're not tracking it, if you don't plan for it, you can't just go buying things and without really having a plan for it. I already mentioned the assessment plan. Again, money will come along with that as well. There's also some transition plans that I will take you to. So hopefully this will open up easily enough. Actually, this will also be on the resource tab for you to download, but you'll see when last year we were transitioning from one assessment to an updated version. And so for those of you who don't know Fountain Pen now, it's a reading level. And so when we were transitioning to the new version, the new edition, the requirements to meet a reading level were a lot more difficult. And so we really had to think about how parents were going to receive the hearing that their child may have gone down a level when actually it's just a different assessment. So we actually really plan for this. And you can see here this kind of tagline that we created. The actual F&P books in the kit have not changed, just the scoring rubric has increased in rigor. So, knowing that, really making sure that parents know their child is still a reader and we're just going to now know more of what to teach. We laid out the choices that we had for how to phase in the new edition. So we could have just made the switch altogether in 1 year, or we could phase it in over the course of the year, which we decided to do because the teachers then who were sharing that information were teachers who already knew the parent and the child, and therefore was a little bit easier of a sell. And you'll even see here, there's that tagline that I gave teachers: your child's reading ability has not changed. The measure of comprehension has increased in rigor. Information will be used to better inform instruction around comprehension, right? And so then we developed a plan. Here's the month, here's the outcome, who's doing it, and here's the results. What's the cost? And so you can see that plan all the way through into, March of from this was last year, and this went all the way through to March, April, and into the following school year. So that's just one example of a transition plan. The next one, just kind of a plan for initial implementation that I wanted to show you. So when we were implementing our new writing curriculum, we really started with, what was the goals for us in the summer, and then what was our professional development plan for our teachers. And so you can see here the date, here's what the topic was, here's what the activities the teachers were going to do, here's what the outcome was going to be for the teachers of the school, how it was going to be delivered, so building level PD, and they had to come up with the Writer's Bill of Rights. And there's some other things we did in August that was, for example, what I did. And then you could see how we planned this all the way through to the end of the school year. And then we had our flesh out of what the kickoff was going to be in each grade level for starting these new units. But what we did was in July, I actually met with all the principals and academic coaches, and we fleshed out this plan and did kind of a year of PD in 1 day. Then we were consistently walking the teachers through that plan for that kind of consistent implementation. And those resources will be on Blackboard for you to download. I already showed you the response to intervention, but I also wanted to show you that we actually kind of do this at the high school level. So let me go ahead and pull that up. So here you could see grade English teachers. Again, we have this in other subjects. I just had this one more accessible. You could see that we had 2 middle school courses, language arts and literature links, taught by 2 different teachers. And so we had the assessments across 8th grade, the common assessments, and we really kind of fleshed out, all right, to qualify for honors English, here's kind of the criteria that we should be looking at, college prep and academic reading. So it's again additional support with a reading specialist. And then there's a co-taught English class with special ed and regular ed, and kind of looking at how to place those kids in the appropriate courses based on a standard set of criteria, and not just the teacher's standalone recommendation. Certainly that would be part of it. But a teacher, it even says here, if you read the little disclaimer at the bottom, it's helped to support the examination of data. Please be mindful students may need more challenge or support, and students should not be held back from academic opportunities. Students may not fit in all criteria evenly, just serve as a tool for using data consistently. So you can see that really trying to get the teacher to look at, where are these students and what do I need to do to help them continue into, the next step. So again, these are all available to you. And then lastly, you just want to kind of think about, some strategies that you can use for studying your own school. So there's a great thing to do is just a lesson review. So everybody, come to the table and let's talk about how we're teaching, gerunds or prepositional phrases, or how we're teaching slope. And so the teachers then can kind of work together to see how does that look across different teachers, across different levels. And it's a nice way then to amp up what's happening across the board in each curriculum area. Obviously, you can survey teachers, parents, and students. You can survey the data. You can look at observation data. Most schools have some type of digital electronic observation tool that you probably can run some reports on. And then you also might want to be thinking about, learning walks. How can you develop a set of criteria that you could then analyze what's going on in your own schools? So when I first started in my job, we did a learning walk on what's called word study in our elementaries. And so we went around with teams of teachers and administrators, and we walked into classrooms and asked at least 5 kids in every room, could they explain what they were learning? And there's a place to just write it. Can you show how you used that new learning in your writing or reading? And then we wrote the example, and it was a yes or no. And that's all we asked. And we walked around, and so we got 20 kids per grade level, and you got 20% of the school that we were able to kind of get a sense of, hey, what's going on with our programming. So when you're studying your own school, a key thing to keep in mind, and I'm going to connect it back to what we did in word study, is really making the familiar strange. So sometimes because you're inside your own organization, you know and recognize what is happening. And without really thinking about how can we kind of really get to know that factually, is going to be something where you need to step out and ask those questions of your kids, right? So what we think is happening, is it really happening, right? So when we did that, you'll see here, we summarized the learning walks and then developed a plan for next steps. So we know that the goals going into our learning walk were to strengthen the alignment by looking at the language arts curriculum, being able to communicate those word study practices and ensure fidelity of them being delivered. Here is our timeline. Again, if you want to pause and look at this, you can. I just want to give you a sense of that. So when we looked at the amount of activities, so you'll see the first walkthrough was in October. That on whole, K through 6, 72% of the activities were considered authentic, which means they were actually applicable to students' reading and writing, whereas the other 28% were things that were isolated practice that didn't apply back into students' reading and writing. And so we found the only grade that was at 100% for authentic activity was kindergarten, not a surprise. Green is first grade, purple is second, gold third, fourth, fifth, and sixth. And so after we did that first learning walk, we gave them feedback. And not surprisingly, 100% of the activities were considered authentic because we gave them a list of things that they should be looking at. When we looked at the students being able to explain their discoveries, what they were learning, just from October to December, we saw, a fairly good increase with our students. As it gets older, it's a little trickier because you're talking about syllables. And so if they didn't have a strong understanding of those things back here in second or first grade, it's a lot harder to make those improvements in a short period of time. But nonetheless, most of them had improvement. And then students be able to show their learning. Again, we saw some improvements in a few months, but that was something that we kept revisiting with our teachers over time, right? And you kind of compare that. And then we summarized the strengths. We highlighted authentic activities for the teachers, what things were working well with the students be able to explain their discovery or what we call their learning. And then the next step. So what we should be doing for moving forward to help strengthen that. We did some things around syllable types, teach mini lessons around syllables and specific mini lessons around syllables to use. Some other logistical things that the schools or the teachers were doing, but you get the idea. So that concludes week 5. Just something I want to kind of get you thinking about for next week. What are future trends in education around us? Some of these are happening in greater spurts at each year. So I want I kind of listed a few here for you to start to think about because your last few papers are going to be around those topics.